Hello, and welcome to the Journeyman's Travels. I'm your host, Daniel Scheifler, Principal Consultant with Improving. Welcome. Today, I'm very pleased to announce that we have reached the end. Yes, the end of Drucker's The Effective Executive, a seminal work in management and leadership. And as we explore this conclusion, Drucker set out to expound upon two key premises in his entire book. One, if the executive's job is to be effective, and perhaps encouragingly, effectiveness can be learned. In fact, executives are paid to be effective. But there's a distinction that needs to be made. Where software engineers are paid to write software, effectiveness is not a subject in the same way that computer science is. It is not something you can simply study and therefore master. Instead, I would describe it more as being like riding a bike. Sure, you can read a book about it, but until you actually get on the bike and kind of get a feel for it, it's not really learned. Drucker describes effectiveness as a self-discipline. And I think it is this point that effectiveness is not just a subject. It's not just a do this checklist, but rather a habit, a self-discipline, a way of choosing to live that makes the book, The Effective Executive, such a lasting contribution in this category. But perhaps more daunting is that this self-discipline is the very fulcrum on which your entire organization rests and moves. You see, the organization's overall effectiveness is tied to the self-development of effective executives. John Maxwell, a present-day leader on leadership, calls this the leadership lid. He describes it that everything rises or falls on leadership, because your organization fundamentally can't operate in a way that your leaders can't support. The leaders put a cap on the trust, and so either delegate or don't. They put a cap on acceptable approaches, acceptable risks, and so your organizations either innovate or they don't. Now, unfortunately for business, the choice is always grow or die. That is, to grow, renew, change, and therefore thrive in a changing environment, or hold still, calcify, and inevitably crumble. Therefore, the continual growth of the executive, the continual renewal of their ideas, their approaches, and the honing of their skills, that the organization's ability to do the same depends. The organization cannot renew, grow, or adapt to the world it will find itself in if your executives aren't doing the same. Now, generally, an organization's goal, of course, is its growth, right? Survive! And that could be monetary. It could be client success. It could be service and impact, because not all organizations are just businesses. But there's a problem there. Just because that's the organization's goal doesn't mean that that's suddenly individually fulfilling work. You could suddenly hit your goal of serving 1 million pots of soup, and there's one guy in the back that his entire job is just ladling soup. Certainly, he's been contributing to accomplishing an organizational goal, but ladling soup as part of that is not automatically fulfilling to the individual. While they were part of the accomplishment may not have felt like it mattered to them. Now, am I saying that guy should go out to the front and get to see all the people he's serving soup to? Maybe. But it's the effective executive's job to determine part of this. But on the flip side, executives and frankly the business should rightly wonder, so what? He had a contract with us. We were, taking care of him. He's helping take care of our goal. So he has a job. He keeps it. It serves him. What more does he want from it? I get it. But if you keep down that line of thinking, you've got a basic premise reversed. Individuals don't exist to serve businesses. Businesses were created to serve individuals. Every organization you have ever experienced exists and was started as a result of someone's attempt to deliver some good to some group at a scale they couldn't manage on their own. Restaurants existed because a cook could cook, but he couldn't serve 200 guests. He could cook 200 servings, but not serve 200 guests. And so he gets some help. Your neighbor who's been tinkering on cars and is thinking to open up a garage, eventually he'll find that he can't fix that many cars unless he gets some help running the jack. Small organization is born. But they exist because there was some good the organization, the person who started the whole thing, thought they could deliver. And then he started gathering people to him or them so that they together could produce more. These executives then that take that step back from the frontline work have to serve a whole bunch of different stakeholders. Obviously, they're leaders entrusted with the lives and the times of their subordinates in the most common example. But they're also trusted to steward significant monetary, social, and even organizational strength for the good of the stakeholders that they're supposed to represent. The vendors, the clients, the employees, the company itself. All of these have needs for the executive to balance. The effective executive bears the responsibility for effectively aligning those forces under their influence for the benefit of all of these. And for the individual, that can mean aligning their fulfillment, their due rewards, their growth, and their work, critically, with the goals and the opportunities available within the organization. But this is a trade. It always has to be give and take. If either side is always winning and the other one mostly losing, the organization isn't going to stand for very long. Its ineffectiveness will doom it. Now, several times, Drucker alludes to the moral and ethical value of effectiveness. In fact, he often indicates that the pursuit of effectiveness is a moral good on the part of the executive. And he is here speaking of a system of values we don't often hear discussed openly today. You may have come across it in the question of, is it a responsibility or a reward? Now, for those of you who haven't heard of it, the question basically centers around the title, influence, rewards, or prestige granted to a newly promoted manager. Someone who used to be a great individual contributor now receives a management title. Was it a reward for their hard work and long service? Or have they been now entrusted with a new responsibility? It's effectively a question of perspective on the part of the newly born executive. But it is at the very heart of Drucker's premise in writing this book. Executives ought to be effective. That is a moral statement. Drucker clearly views the role of the executive as a responsibility, not merely a reward. And he expects those serving in those roles to recognize the greater requirement placed on them. Because getting this wrong, as with any moral failing, has dire consequences. To whom much is given, much is required. Or if you prefer the Uncle Ben framing, with great power comes great responsibility. Because the stakes get higher. Now let me explain, right? If the individual who is serving as an executive isn't effective, they don't just injure themselves. For want of their effectiveness, because their group is slightly disorganized, they don't really know what they're pursuing, and they haven't really managed their time to focus on what actually matters, their subordinates, about 5 to 10 people or so, deliver less. For want of the delivery, maybe of the correct value or of enough, the department, 15 to 50 people, will end up missing their goal. For want of the goal, maybe it was time to market of a new product, the company, hundreds of thousands of people, hundreds to thousands of people, produce less. We have less market share. We're shrinking. We're not able to serve as well, or it costs us more to do so. For want of that product, for want of the superior service that could have been provided by the potential of thousands of individuals, the nation, millions of people, now suffers, perhaps minuscule, but increased want. For want of one executive's effectiveness, 5 to 15 people fail to achieve their potential. 15 to 50 people fail for reasons beyond their control. Hundreds to thousands of people are less secure in their future, and millions of people now must bear a multiplied cost of something that never should have cost that much. Now, yes, this is a bit of an apocryphal example, and you could always argue, oh, there's other companies you could buy from. True. But the fact remains. The executive, if they screw up, impacts all of the people who are supposed to be working under them, or with the group they represent. Considering such a cost, effectiveness must be learned. Executives hold a great influence within their spheres. But with all those potent tools, like power tools, misuse brings ruin. The executive faces a stiff, uphill challenge, to be sure. And in aligning those various forces under their influence is a real job. Done well, and your organization will be like a prosperous garden. But done poorly, and it'll be more like a dust bowl. Being so great a challenge, and perhaps more importantly, a job unlike those that the executive will have faced before, the future of all of our organizations rests on our ability to effectively train them, and on those executives of tomorrow to grow their own skills and perhaps more importantly, to recognize and respond appropriately when they discover a gap. So, my fellow journeymen, as we close out this final chapter, let us revisit Drucker's words from the very start of the book. Effectiveness can be learned. And as we just discussed, it must be. With that, I wish you all a journey into greater and greater effectiveness. And of course, safe travels, my fellow journeymen.